I really feel like God's calling me on this other path, on this other place that I need to go. And I just had this overwhelming feeling. And that was one of the experiences that gave me the resolve to follow my own heart.
Michelle Phillips was raised in Ogden, Utah, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In 2022, she joined Community of Christ, which is an offshoot of the LDS Church, and she has recently been called to a leadership position within Community of Christ. Beginning in October, she will begin a role in the church's Inland West Mission Center. We sat down with her to talk about this new calling, her faith journey, why she left the LDS Church, and so much more. The beliefs of Community of Christ. We get into all of it. Michelle, thanks so much for speaking with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Many people who are watching this are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So similar to that church, the Community of Christ has missions all over the world, I would
Mhm.
assume, right? And the area that you're over covers all of the state of Idaho, parts of Utah, parts of Wyoming, and parts of Washington. And your position,
And sorry, and all of Montana.
oh, and all of Montana too. Okay.
Yeah,
And so your position, explain a little bit about what you do.
sure. So, starting in October, if I am sustained in our annual conference, I will be the Mission Center president and financial officer. So I will be both the ministerial and administrative representative over that geographic area. So we have multiple congregations in those states, and I will work with them um, primarily as the liaison between our church headquarters and those congregations, also leading the programs and advising and providing ministry to our congregations.
So you were taking on this position, and you were also, from what I have gathered, the first woman to have this role, and also the first person who is a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it's a little bit of a historic calling to some degree. What are your comments about that? How do you feel about being the first woman and the first former member of that church to be in this role?
It is exciting. So I'm the first woman and first former LDS person in our mission center. There are other women who have similar roles in other mission centers, and there are some um, ex-LDS folks who have this position in other mission centers too. So, but for our area, it's really exciting because we do see a lot of interest and growth in our mission center. And a lot of those folks, the new folks who are coming, are they're questioning, they've left their former faith, and so sometimes that transition can be really difficult. And so to have a leader that has experience with that and who has been through that um, is kind of exciting for us in
Yeah.
general.
Let's talk about, so how long have you been a member of the Community of Christ?
So I officially joined in January of 2022. I had been attending for 5 or 6 years before that.
So what drew you to this faith? Because you grew up, like we mentioned, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, when you were a lifelong member of that. You were raised in that church, right?
Yep. I was raised in a pioneer ancestry. Um, my ancestors were some of the first to settle here in Davis County in Utah. Um, I served my LDS mission actually in Independence, Missouri. So at the Visitor Center, which is right across the street from the Community of Christ Temple. And that was my first introduction to Community of Christ. I got to know a little bit about the history, other restoration branches too. So in Missouri, it's more than just the two churches. There's lots of other restoration branches, and I've always loved church history. So that was kind of my first introduction to it. And then years later, fast forward, came home from my mission, got married in the temple, had two kids. Um, and it was during a time when there was a lot of a lot of things going on in the church and in Utah. The ordained women movement had started. There was a lot of chatter about that. My now ex-husband had left the church or stopped attending previously, and I was attending on my own, single mom, two kids, uh, and I had a really long faith journey out of the church. When I finally decided I needed to look for something different, I was looking online. Some of my friends had posted ordained women profiles on their website, and one of them was Brittany Mangelson, who's now the pastor of Community of Christ. And I was like, wait a minute, I remember those people from my mission. What are they doing now? I didn't know they were in Utah. So I Googled their website and I started watching videos of President Steve Beasy. So he's our current prophet president that will be retiring this next week. And I just had this overwhelming feeling about this would be a good place for me that would honor my restoration heritage and be comfortable and familiar, also um, allow me to express some of those more social and political and theological views that were not fitting with where I was. But even after that first time of jumping on the website and looking, it was a long road because I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. I had, family things going on. I was very involved in my ward. Um, but the more I researched and the more I thought about it and prayed about it, the more I felt like this is where I needed to be and where I would eventually end up.
So you mentioned, you felt compelled to join the community of Christ. It kind of answered some of your political and other concerns. Do you mind if
Yeah,
we get into some of those? Were you
sure.
having those particular issues you were having with your former faith?
Yeah. So, a big thing for me was LGBTQ plus um, inclusion. I actually lived in California during Prop 8, and this is the time that I was very, very involved in the LDS Church, and that was very difficult for me. I did not feel comfortable with um, how that played out, and I really felt like God loved all of their children and wanted them to thrive, and that this was not the way to do that. I really struggled with that for a long time. I have lots of friends and family that are queer, and as I watched them struggle to find a place where they were loved, where they were welcomed, that was a really um, big part of my faith journey. Community of Christ has been in the United States, has been ordaining folks, queer folks since 2013, and we still have a long way to go toward full inclusion, but that there's at least a pathway there, and there's places where folks are welcomed and loved, and not just welcomed, but affirmed and celebrated for who they are and who God has created them to be. So that was a really big part. Interestingly enough, female ordination was not necessarily on the top of my list, but equality um, definitely
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
in whatever form that it took. Having a place where we have a song in Community of Christ, for everyone born, a place at the table. And to have that table be open to everyone regardless of their gender or their orientation or their race or their disability or their nationality is was really important to me.
I was interested to read about um, your family's reaction to you joining this church. Have
Mm.
they have because they're all members of the LDS Church. How did they react to this decision for you to join Community of Christ?
I think it has been difficult um, for my extended family to understand why I, and I've had several people ask me why I would leave, and especially why I would join another church, and especially why I would join this church. However, they have been as supportive as they could be, while still not really understanding why I would do this and why it's so important to me. I have really good relationships with most of my family, and um, they've been supportive. My mom and my sisters came to my baptism and my ordination, and it's been really heartening to see because I do hear stories, less so now, but as we have folks that are coming from the LDS Church who come to Community of Christ, we do see a lot of families who are angry, are judgmental, who are unkind, um, or who think that their loved one is lost or deceived. And I haven't had that same response from my family, which I've been very grateful for.
Yeah. There was a moment you talked about in another interview where, you were considering joining this church and there was a moment of reluctance or hesitation because you thought that you were, you know, betraying, or maybe that's too strong of a word, but something akin to that. You thought you were betraying your forefathers and, your pioneer ancestors. And then you had a moment where you felt like they were cheering you on for this
Yeah,
decision. Do you want to talk about that?
I would love to. This is my pioneer ancestry is very important to me. I was raised on stories on all sides of my family, of people joining the church in Norway, in England, in Denmark, and giving up everything and coming here first, many of them first to Nauvoo and then here to Utah. Um, and I get emotional about it still, thinking about their stories. Um, and I
What
have
are,
spent a lot of time
uh,
doing family history. Sorry, go ahead.
and this group of pioneer ancestors that you descended from, are they part of any, well-known group that LDS Church members would be familiar with?
Sure. So my Phillips name is from Edward Phillips, who and his family, who were part of the United Brethren. Um, they were in England, and their whole 200 person church joined in England and were baptized at Benbow Farm. And they came here and they settled Davis County. Those are probably a story that people would know. Um, and then one of my other ancestors that's really important to our family is Archibald Gardner and one of his wives, who's Serena Torgeson. So if you know Gardner Village in um, West Jordan area, that's my ancestor. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, you came from some pretty good LDS stock,
Yeah.
and then you're considering the community of Christ and this experience with thinking about them and your heritage and reconciling that with, your desires to join community of Christ. And what was that moment where it was like this is the right thing to do for you?
Yeah, there were a series of experiences, but one of them um, is about Serena. So she was one of the very first people to join the church in Norway. And according to family history, the first woman to join the church in Norway. And her mom had a really, really difficult time with it and basically disowned her. Right before she and her husband were supposed to come on the boat over to the US, her husband, who was a um, captain, ship captain, died in his shipwreck. And as far as I can tell, Serena left everything and never had communication with her mother again. We came across, walked across the plains to Utah, with her little children, and then eventually married Archibald Gardner. And as I was thinking about her one day, I remember it very vividly. I was doing the dishes and I was thinking about her, and I had grown up with this idea of it's our responsibility to honor their sacrifice and to be faithful to their sacrifice, and that's what we owe them. And I was kind of talking to her in my head. Like, it's like I really feel like God's calling me on this other path, on this other place that I need to go. And I just had this overwhelming feeling of that's what she did. Her family didn't understand it. She didn't really know what it would mean, but she knew that God was calling her. And she was willing to follow that call. And that was one of the experiences that gave me the resolve to follow my own heart. And yeah,
So I want to hold that thought for a second because I want to come back and talk to you about what your faith means to you. But before we get into that, I'd like to understand what the beliefs are, the basic beliefs are of the community of Christ. I know that the community of Christ and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints both share a belief in the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith. Where does it differ from there?
sure. So we kind of talk about we are both restoration churches that
Mhm.
share, about 15-ish years of history and then diverged. So we are a peace and justice centered church. And that identity is really important to us. And part of that comes from Joseph Smith III, who was um, the first leader of, or the first prophet president of the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was established in 1860.
Okay, I was going to ask, when did the reorganized church start? It was 1860. And what's the backstory on him? Like what's his story of starting this church?
Sure. So he was a young man, um, and really a boy, a young teenager when Joseph Smith Jr. died. And he stayed with Emma in Nauvoo and was raised there. And for a long time, he didn't want to have anything to do with a church. And there were a lot of folks that did not come west with Brigham Young. So there were different groups going on. And one of these groups organized and started meeting. They really wanted Joseph Smith III to lead the church. They believed that Joseph Smith Jr. had wanted his son to lead. And they asked him several times, and he said no. He didn't want to have anything to do with it, partly because he saw what it did to his father and to his community and to his family, and that impacted him very deeply. And this group, Emma started attending with this group and was involved. After a series of um, asking him, and he would pray about it, and they asked him again, and he would pray about it. He finally felt like was the right thing to do. And so then when joined this group, they organized into the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Over the years, how have the beliefs of the community of Christ, kind of evolved and been different than the LDS Church?
Sure. So some of the main differences are we do not practice or affirm everything that Joseph Smith established. For example, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, now Community of Christ, never practiced polygamy. We've never practiced temple ordinances like baptism for the dead. Um, a lot of You may hear members of the church talk about we're more of a Kirtland church than a Nauvoo church. Um, So some of the ways that that happens is we have a Trinitarian understanding of God. So rather than having God who is a resurrected, glorified human, we have a much more traditionally Christian Trinitarian understanding of God as revealed in Jesus Christ and through the Holy Spirit. You do not, there's a range of perspectives on the Book of Mormon. It is one of our scriptures. We do focus much more on the Bible and on the Doctrine and Covenants, which we have continued to add to. So our Doctrine and Covenants has, I think, 164 sections because every prophet president has added to it. And that continuing revelation piece, that piece of being a people with a prophet, moving into a prophetic people, is really central to Community of Christ. Um, as far as the Book of Mormon goes, some people will view it as sacred scripture, and some think of it more as this is inspired theological storytelling. You do not have to believe that the Book of Mormon is historically accurate to be in Community of Christ. And I would venture to say that the majority of our members do not hold fast to a historical Book of Mormon. Um, Joseph Smith is our founder, the first prophet president. But one of the things that we say is that he's part of our history, but history is not doctrine. And Joseph Smith is not the center of our faith. Jesus Christ is the center of our faith. Um, and most of us are much more concerned with what God is saying today and interpreting scripture in a way that is responsible and that also looks forward to knowing that prophets are not infallible and that we can continually interpret and understand what God is saying for today and for tomorrow. Um, so some of the ways that that plays out include the way that we do World Conference, which is coming up next week. So if you're in the LDS Church, this is going to be a very different conference experience. Like we get together and because we believe in a grassroots prophetic people, we are bringing forward resolutions that we will have been discussing and debating and voting on. And each congregation or each mission center can send delegates to World Conference, and we are actually discussing policy, theology, beliefs, administration, and we will vote on it. And sometimes things don't pass. And then we move on. For example, women's ordination took years and years. And that vote ended up being pretty divisive for the church when it happened in 1984.
Now, today, how many members of the Community of Christ are there worldwide?
There are about 250,000,
250,000.
about a quarter of a million.
And you guys have missions, which is something you're involved in. What is the mission of the church?
So, the mission of the church is to promote communities of love, joy, and peace, and to proclaim Jesus Christ. And so, to do that, we have mission initiatives and we have enduring principles that support that.
Gotcha. So you've been a member of this church now for about 3 years, and now you're taking on this leadership role. What is the thing about this faith for you that has been most fulfilling and rewarding for you?
I feel like I can be myself. I feel like I can grow and into the person that God is calling me to be without limits and restrictions. I love our focus on peace and justice. One of the things I love about Community of Christ is we gave up years ago the idea of one true church and rather see ourselves as part of the great Christian story, part of God's story here. And we have a very unique and maybe small in comparison, 250,000 is not that many members, but an important place in that story. And to me, that feels a lot more authentic. I also love all the things that I get to do and be involved in. I have people will tell you too many ideas, and I get to bring those ideas and say, hey, what if we try this? What if we do this? And we're small enough um and we have this that kind of grassroots culture where these ideas and these things we can talk about them and decide, together what we want to do. And so I get to I also really love working for a church, and that's not really something that I thought that I would end up doing, but it's really
Hmm.
fun.
Hmm. You live in Ogden, Utah,
Mhm.
but you were telling me on the phone that you were just in Eastern Idaho just this last weekend. You were attending
Yeah.
the Pocatello congregation. How was your visit to Eastern Idaho?
It was wonderful. I always love, it's really nice. It's about exactly 2 hours from my doorstep to the Pocatello congregation. So we took my kids up, we went for the day, came back. They had an ordination service on Sunday that I got to attend, and we have a great little group there. Sorry. Um, and they are growing. And so a couple of their, or three of their members have started what we call a house church in Idaho Falls, where they live. And so in the afternoon, once a month, they have like an informal church at their house for people who are interested in learning more about Community of Christ. And we've done that in Rexburg in the past too, depending on interest.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so Michelle, this has been great. I've enjoyed this conversation. It's always fun to learn about other faiths. I enjoy having these kinds of conversations. Anything before I let you go that you would want to just leave with the community about what the community of Christ is and why they should maybe consider learning more about it?
I mean, I also love learning about other faith traditions. And so if you're interested, we are pretty chill people. So you can show up at church, and chances are we're not going to pressure you into anything. So you can show up and discover. It's a great place to come with questions, to come with uncertainty. We live in the questions. We love the questions. Um, and yeah, I hope people check it out and see what we're about if they're interested. Um, because I love it. And this is a place that's been a really good fit for me.